All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 25th day of October. Should I say it's 2 months to Christmas? My name is Sam Kituko. Karibu sana as we continue with the show, and it's time to have a conversation about the latest in public discourse. And I want to introduce the panelists that we have here. I have Yusuf Hassan, the Member of Parliament for Kamukunji constituency in Nairobi County. Good morning, Mheshimiwa. Senator Gloria Oroba, nominated senator from the UDA party. Good morning.
Good morning.
I have Senator Godfrey Osotsi from Vihiga County. Good morning.
Good morning, Kenyans.
And Mheshimiwa Kimani Kuria from Molo constituency. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam. Good morning, Kenyans.
Great, and it's good to see all of you here. And we're waking up to the headlines that you're seeing there. The tough questions after journalists killing. Pakistani shot, this is on the Standard, Pakistani shot and killed in Magadi in what police claim is a case of mistaken identity. But given the profile of the newscaster, the investigative work he was engaged in that ruffled the feathers of the high and mighty, the world is calling for answers and details, some of the timelines up until his death. Then you'll see on the front page of the Daily Nation, it's a similar story. Wanted in Pakistani for sedition. He was a man on the run. Police officers who spoke to the Nation said Arshad Shari's car was flagged down, but the driver sped away, forcing the officers to shoot at the car. Sharif's brother, Kuram, drove for 25 kilometers without the front right tire, which had been deflated by a gunshot as he tried to save his brother's life. He then called Nakar Ahmed, a Pakistani who runs Modamp Quenya, an entertainment spot that also has a shooting range that is open to the public, to inform him of the incident. Nakar advised them to pass by his place, which is located on the way to Nairobi, and on arrival at the main gate, Kuram found out that his brother had already died of a gunshot wound on the head. Of course, you see the image of what transpired, the image of the car, where the bullet holes went in, and of course there are many questions. I don't know if you have thoughts. I'll start with Senator Osotsi because he was the first to arrive here. Almost arrived before me. But Senator, tell me, what are your thoughts this morning on this news that, of course, there's a story that on the Nation says that a diplomatic row was last evening simmering between Nairobi and Islamabad?
Well, I would say it's a very unfortunate incident because clearly, reading through the story, there's a lot to be told. So the police needs to tell us more what happened. It cannot just be an issue of mistaken identity. A lot of questions arise. For instance, you realize that the bullets were targeted to the side where the journalist was seated. There was no bullet towards the driver's side. Secondly, when police flags you down, there are several things you can do. Either you stop, or if you speed away, then the police needs to immobilize the vehicle by maybe shooting at the tire, especially if there is no exchange of fire. So a lot of there are a lot of gaps in the story, and I think this is going to affect the bilateral relations between Kenya and Pakistan. So police needs to tell Kenyans more and tell the world more about this incident, considering that this journalist had fled away from the country because of differences with the state in Pakistan. So people won't just believe that this was a normal incident. People will have every reason to think this was an assassination.
Wow. Effected by Kenyan authorities?
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, I mean, all these questions that we are asking, if they are not answered, then...
because you said that it points to assassination and it is Kenyan police that are at the center of it, how would that work? Who wants him dead?
Well, let me not speculate, but we're just analyzing that if you look at the whole thing, in fact, I was watching TV last night, and the citizen really analyzed this matter and asked a lot of questions about what could have happened. So all that you put together, then you realize there are a lot of gaps in the story as to how this journalist met his death, looking at his background, looking at the fact that he was also involved in coming up with a documentary on matters of corruption, looking at the fact that he was critical of the regime in Pakistan, and basically the fact that the shooting seemed to be very perfect. In fact, that was not a normal shooting. It was a shooting from an expert. You could see behind the rear glass, there were only 3 bullets, bullet holes. And that is what made the difference. So really, there are a lot of questions that the world is asking. And I think what is most important is for the Kenyan authority to carry out a thorough investigation into this matter. Okay, all right. Senator Gloria, what are you thinking this morning?
I was following the line of thought when you're questioning if it's a targeted, you know, then is it really I think you are alluding. So is the police force involved in this? But we know that there have been a lot of rogue police, and actually that has informed the disbandment of the special unit. So we wouldn't put it past that, because we know that in the past the police have been used as a hit squad for other kind of assassinations. So. And if you look at in 2020 alone, IPOA recorded 3,200 killings under, illegal, or let me say, killings by the police. So, yeah, we need to be told. We need to be told what really happened. The question is, though, who's going to investigate this? Because the Independent Police Oversight Authority, IPOA, I don't think they're in a position to do so. I think they have been compromised over the last couple of years. So when we are also calling to have those investigations, it is an issue that is touching on the police. So therefore, the police cannot investigate themselves for sure. There is a conflict. IPOA, that is supposed to be an independent oversight authority that should keep the police in check, I think has been compromised. So therefore now, we beg to ask the question, then who will investigate, so that we can be sure that we are actually getting findings that are not influenced by any other, interested parties. And I think maybe this is the time we should talk about the special inquiries, the committees there. We're talking about state capture and setting up an inquiry, a commission. I think at this point, if we're not looking to have a complete oversight of, a complete overhaul of IPOA, then we better look into, because IPOA came into place through a parliamentary act. So we better look into how we are going to have a proper independent oversight authority for the police, because it's becoming too much. The missing people, the killings, the violence, police brutality that is not really, we are not holding anyone accountable. So I think the president needs to look into this to the extent of setting up a commission. Okay. Yeah. All right. Mheshimiwa Hassan, is there something we're not seeing? Because if you look at the reports, whether it's on the Daily Nation or the Standard or even Citizen TV, you see that he was a high-profile journalist, of course, was involved in a lot of investigative work. He had actually fled home for fear for his life. Then here, there's a story on page 3 of the Nation saying that he was about to release explosive graft documentary behind closed doors, the Pakistani version of the documentary, which makes allegations of corruption by ruling party leaders in Pakistan, shows how politicians use the international financial system and offshore jurisdictions to launder their ill-gotten wealth. How does the country explain this to the world?
Well, actually, it's a terrible, terrible news for us as a country, in the sense that this has kind of left a big blot on the image and reputation of our country. The death has happened in this country in unexplained circumstances. So both apart from the unfortunate incident of this gentleman losing his life, it has also put us in a very, very compromising position. So I think, as the others have said, there is an urgent need to get to the bottom of this issue and to investigate and find out the circumstances in which this particular journalist was killed. And I think there are a lot of questions then, there are answers. And that's why I think to a certain extent I see that IPOA, the independent police oversight agency, is working on it. But this is beyond it. This is beyond the agency. And I'd also like to add that the fact that we've had extrajudicial killings and misuse and abuse of firearms by the police, maybe this is a good opportunity for the leadership of the country, for the president and the institutions that deal with security, to constitute a commission or an inquiry that will deal with this thing and the many others. Because, for example, the loss of life, the killing of an individual, is a major violation of our constitution as well as international law. Article 26 is very clear about the sanctity of life. We have Article 29, Article 48, Article 49, Article 50 and 51. All of these articles emphasize the importance of protecting lives and the fact that life is the most important and fundamental right. And if you take that from an individual, and now it involves a foreigner, a very high-profile foreigner, I think it is good for our country now to start looking at this thing in a holistic way, going to the bottom of it. And also, it allows us an opportunity to be able to investigate and reform the police service. Our police service seems to be rotten in some ways that it requires. It's a good opportunity for the new government of President Ruto to be able to sort of use this particular opportunity to clean out the police service and create a police service that will protect our constitutional rights and also would protect life. The reverberation of this particular death is going to affect our tourism. It is going to affect how our country is seen by outsiders. Apart from the fact that maybe this guy was up to something that somebody else wanted to stop. Was this purely an accident? Were the police used as a proxy in executing this particular gentleman? And many other factors. And how do you use firearms in that particular sense? That there was, even if it was a mistaken identity, the vehicle they were looking for had apparently a child in it. Would they have also killed the child in it? So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I think there is an opportunity now for us to be able to look at the whole issue of extrajudicial killings. Because if you look at the number of killings mentioned by the senator, 3,000 is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. It is as if we are at war with our own citizens. So the time has come now that since the president has disbanded that killer squad, to be able to go even beyond that, because every one of these 3,000 people is a father, a husband, a brother. They are families who do not know what has happened to their loved ones. And it's a good opportunity to bring a closure, right, so that people know what has happened to their loved ones. And I come from a constituency where a lot of these extrajudicial killings have happened, in which mothers, wives are asking me every day what has happened to their loved ones. And we had no clue what had happened to them until we were told that there was a killer squad that was authorized to do these things. Now the time has come to face the truth and deal with that issue once and for all.
Okay. All right. And Mheshimiwa Kimani, so then, with all these concerns, what best is there to do? Because it's just over a week after the president directed the disbandment of the special service unit, and people thought that now such kind of issues will be behind us. Then this happens under his leadership. How do we deal with this as a country?
Thank you very much, Sam. First of all, I think it's a very bad day for Kenyans, because we are trending on news across the world about the death of this very well decorated and celebrated journalist. I think it's even a sadder day for our media fraternity, because if such a great and celebrated journalist can just die like that in our country, then what is the safety of all the upcoming and all the other journalists in this country who wants to do good, to unearth the evils in the society? And if such a person can just die like that, then I think there's a very big reason to be worried. However, I'm happy because we have a government that knows that this was bound to happen, and that's why in his wisdom the president disbanded the special unit, I think a week or two ago. And that does not mean that the disbandment of that special unit precludes the availability of rogue officers across the country. I think it might take some time for some of these officers to realize they are not God, that the gift of life is given freely by God and should only be taken by God, and how they should therefore react to any particular situation that they find themselves in should be with as much little force as possible. It's, however, again important to notice that we could have been caught again in a fight that's not really our own. It's just unfortunate that the person who was used for this execution is one of our police officers. Because this journalist, is wanted for abetting mutiny in Pakistan. And he was actually just freeing his country to safety. And I think it would not be far-fetched to imagine that it is the same people who were looking for him in Pakistan that probably followed him here and found an opportunity of using a rogue hit squad, or officer to really terminate it. So it's really unfortunate that has happened in Kenya. We have the Independent Police Oversight Authority, if we will go as per our Constitution of our Acts of Parliament, who should ideally investigate this matter. But I strongly believe they're not competent enough, they don't have the right attitude, they do not have the right goodwill, they do not even have the drive to do this. Because as this has been discussed here...
Who should investigate then?
Ideally, that should be the Independent Police Oversight Authority. But I'm saying, if all these extrajudicial killings have been happening over the years and nothing really substantial has happened, then I think it is time to disband it and to rethink its composition. And I think across our different, what we're calling independent institutions, is find out how independent are they and how decisive are they and how effective are they in carrying out, quote unquote, their independent duties. So I think I would wish that I would say here confidently that since we have an Independent Police Oversight Authority, then this matter would be picked up by the authority, and it will be thoroughly investigated and and get to the bottom of this. However, I don't have that confidence because nothing really much has happened over the years when there has been this extrajudicial killing. I was watching, I think it is a chairperson of the authority, claim that they have now aligned themselves to the government agenda. I'm like, there is no aligning yourself. There has never been power given to anybody to kill. So really, it is not really the Kenya Kwanza's agenda. It is the power of the Constitution that gives the sanctity of life, that says you cannot take away someone's life unless there is proof beyond reasonable doubt that, for example, as a police officer, you were in danger or that person is a danger to the public or to the people around that person. So to really imagine the chairperson will say that, we're now going to do the right thing because we have aligned ourselves to the government's agenda. The right to protection of life is not Kenya Kwanza's agenda. It is in the Kenyan Constitution. And anybody claiming to hold an office, especially with that decorated with the term independent, like the Independent Police Oversight Authority, should really owe their allegiance to the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, not to any government of the day.
Okay, and there's a story on page 6 of the Daily Nation of the agency speaking about IPOA starts crack units probe. The agency is investigating disappearance of 2 Indians and a Kenyan. And of course, there's a list of persons that are found in Yala River, 19 of them. And they also detailed the last date they were seen and the place they were last at. For instance, Joseph Otieno was last seen on the 9th of July 2021, and the last place of sight was GSU headquarters in Ruaraka. Philemon Chepkwony, 3rd December 2021, last time seen, and that was in Dandora, same as Peter Mutuku. Then they go on, and quite some details. Many of them last seen in Nairobi. There's one in Navaholo, Mumias, Jamhuri Estate, Ngongoro, that's back in Nairobi. Senator Sotsi, I mean, with all what is going on, how then do you ensure, because like he says, people are aligning themselves with the agenda of the new government, and in as much as that may sound unnecessary given the constitution that we have, sometimes it is a reality. Many state agencies and institutions are aligning themselves, quote unquote. So what is it that we must do to get it right so that this kind of unnecessary killings, extrajudicial killings, do not return regardless of who is in office?
Well, first of all, I want to commend the president for disbanding that DCI unit, a unit that we are told has been involved in these extrajudicial killings. But I think the president needs to do more than just disbanding, because before he made that decision to disband, he must have had information, concrete information about the activities of this unit, about the killings and their involvement. I think he needs to save us time by just taking action on the killings. Because if this unit has been accused of all these extrajudicial killings in Yala and many other places, why can't the president just order action to be taken against the people involved? Instead of now taking us back to IPOA to do the investigation and all that. So that's the question that many Kenyans are asking. Yes, the president has disbanded this unit, but what happens to the crimes committed by this unit? I think that's the starting point. Secondly, I think we need an inquiry, a proper inquiry, as Mheshimiwa Yusuf has said, to look into this whole matter of extrajudicial killings and disappearances. I think we have one gentleman who was Mr. Mbijiwe, who has disappeared to date. No one knows whether he's alive or dead. We also need to be told about these people who have just disappeared. Where are they? So the government needs to tell us more about the crimes committed by this unit. It's not just about disbanding them. What crimes have they committed? Who is involved? Who should be punished? And where are these people who disappeared to date? And then they carry out a proper inquiry into the conduct of police, a proper inquiry into the extrajudicial killings, and also, if possible, they recommend some measures, maybe legislative measures or administrative measures that should be taken so that this matter is dealt with once and for all.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll keep on seeing this, because can you imagine, after the president has disbanded the unit, we now have this killing that happened yesterday, this incident that happened yesterday. So that tells you that the problem is very deep within the police force.
Senator Robert, just before you take a break, so of course there are several processes that are going on. In the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service is already doing investigations. In fact, they presented a few police officers in court yesterday, and they were seeking some extra 30 days to continue with the investigations. IPOA says that it's going to do its job. Ordinarily, beyond the internal affairs, maybe the DCI should be getting to investigate. And you're saying that you lack confidence, especially in IPOA. What then should we do? Because, I mean, these questions have to be resolved in some way.
You know, one of the mandates that IPOA has is to actually monitor and ensure that the internal affairs of the police unit is actually, the disciplinary matters and stuff is transparent and is is being followed without any influence. But when I say I don't have any confidence in IPOA, it's because even if you look at the number of convictions that they have had since IPOA was put together, I think it's 2016. If you can actually count the number of convictions. If you compare the number of convictions that they have against the extrajudicial killings, which is what their core mandate is, to actually investigate those extrajudicial killings by the police service, to investigate, violence by police service, just rogue police. But if you look at the convictions they have against the number of cases that we have had, cases of Kenyans being killed, it doesn't make any sense, because it's sort of, you can tell that it is not really an independent oversight authority. So now, when you talk about now the internal police unit, the one that actually now ensures disciplinary actions, and that is being given oversight by IPOA. So the whole thing is compromised. So and I believe that the president...
How compromised? Independent?
It is compromised. It is compromised. I've just given an example of the number of convictions. I'm not quite sure, but there are a handful. The number of convictions that IPOA has come together, been able to put together or been able to push through since inception of IPOA, and the number of cases of extrajudicial killings of police, it doesn't make sense. If you look at the number of missing persons up until now, because, missing persons, according to the Section 118 of the Investigative Act, is 7 years and below. You're still missing. Until it's 7 years, then you will now be presumed dead. But the number of missing persons that's still out there, you cannot, you actually would, if IPOA was to be put in front of a committee to explain what they have been up to. Remember, this is an independent authority that is funded. This is an independent authority that is greased by taxpayers, and they cannot be able to account for their time in office. That's how I feel. So for me, I think, in that sense, even if they are not compromised by external bodies, then they are just redundant in terms of being intentional on actually executing their mandate. So for me, this is another case of, if IPOA came, and it did come into a play through a parliamentary act, then I believe it is time also, as legislators, we go back to the drawing board, and agree that IPOA is not up to task. And so what else can we do in terms of legislation? Meanwhile, I believe this is an opportune time. When the lady the CEO for IPOA said that they're aligning to the government agenda. It is right, yeah? It sounds strange, but because this is the first government that has actually had an agenda to ensure that we stop the extrajudicial killings. So she is right in a sense that they are aligning to that agenda. But you see, as Mheshimiwa Sotsi said, there's nothing, it's not about aligning to an agenda when actually constitutionally that is your core mandate. But I think in the meantime, as we try to legislate how we're going to have an independent oversight authority that is going to regulate these rogue police officers, our president should put together a commission of inquiry.
Okay. And I thought it's Mheshimiwa Kuria Kimani.
Yes, I think it's Kuria Kimani who actually said that.
Yusuf Hassan, unless I give you just a few seconds, because I need us to take a look at some. Let me just take a look at the feedback here. The narrative that police flagged the journalist down and they defied doesn't warrant shooting the passenger. You shoot the tire to immobilize the car. This was pure assassination. That's JA Economics. Someone else, Engineer Lazaro. Government should open up after thorough investigations, or else face the wrath of journalists around the globe. Would like to know if it was really mistaken identity or just pure rising cases of mysterious political assassinations in Africa. Godi Baraza, there is more than what meets the eye in the mysterious killing of the Pakistani journalist. The narrative and reasons given by the police for shooting don't make any logical sense. Radical changes must be done in our security agencies. That's what they're saying. And Senator Oroba, it's not 2016, the first board sat in June 2012, so they've been in office for 10 years.
Even longer, imagine.
At least. Mheshimiwa Yusuf Hassan, you wanted to make your contribution?
Yes, I first of all wanted to also add my voice to the fact that the President has done very well. I want to congratulate him for, first of all, for the first time for the government to admit that in fact we had killer squads that were authorized by the government to carry extrajudicial killings and to disband that particular unit. this is a significant move. But I think we can go beyond that. You know, when we criticize IPOA, I think IPOA can do the job. IPOA is a constitutional body. But when the government itself is breaking its own rules, when the government is operating unconstitutionally by carrying these things out, all the other government bodies, whether they're independent or not, are put in a very difficult situation. First of all, in terms of funding, IPOA doesn't have sufficient funding. It doesn't have sufficient personnel because the scale of the extrajudicial killing is so large that it requires a special inquiry to be able to deal with that. The second element I would say is to empower government departments to deal with these issues constitutionally, because until now, if you have a unit that is authorized to do these things, you cannot have another government department investigating that particular agency for work that has been authorized by that particular government. Now that the president has brought that to a closure, we need to go further by beginning to look for the truth. We need to know the truth. We need to know what happened. We need justice for the victims. And that requires something much more than IPOA or IPOA can do. IPOA can continue to investigate some of the cases of disappearances, but this issue is so big that it requires more than Band-Aid. It requires more than firefighting from a small agency like IPOA. And I think that's why I think it would be good for the president if he went one step further and said, look, guys, there's no way we can get to the bottom of these things without a special inquiry. And he has now opened a Pandora's box. Let's get to the bottom of that box and see who was doing this, where it has been done, what has happened to these people, so that also the families can come to closure. The people who are affected can come to closure. And I think we need to also tighten our legislation. For example, there is the International Convention for the Protection of all the persons from enforced disappearances. Kenya is not a party to that particular convention. I will call upon the government to quickly ratify that convention so that our legislation and our laws come into line with international standards.
Right.
And that would be just a good beginning. But I think this matter is too big to be dealt by any other agency that is in existence today. We require extra efforts to be able to clean up the system, to bring justice to the victims, and also to build the reputation of our country. You know, are we a human rights country? Are we a democracy? Are we abiding by our constitution? Are we protecting lives? This raises a lot of questions about how the previous governments have operated with that impunity to be able to execute whoever they didn't like whenever they wanted to. And this particular incident is a clear example that, in fact, our police force is rotten. It's not only rogue elements who are doing this. It has been a practice in the entire police force to use extrajudicial killings as a weapon of control. And it is time we brought that to an end and to start on a new chapter.
Very interesting. I'm looking at the mandate of IPOA, and it's quite wide. Part of it is to investigate deaths and serious injuries caused by police action, to investigate police misconduct, to monitor, review and audit investigations and actions by Internal Affairs Unit of the police, to conduct inspections of police premises, to monitor and investigate policing operations and deployment,